Captains, welcome to the channel. I am your host, the USS Endeavor, and welcome aboard the Giussano. And now that I've pissed off every Italian with my horrible accent, welcome to a new series involving the Italian cruiser line with SAP shells. And are they good? Well, against lightly armored targets like destroyers, the SAP-only rounds do devastating damage, and they can pen and do that all day long to destroyers and lightly armored targets. So we're going to take a look at everything from the ground up. This is a brand new series, so we're going to take each ship down the line, starting with this one, and we're going to look at it in detail, see what the strengths are, if there are any, and then move on from there. We're going to take a look at our commander, who is Luigi Sansonetti, and he helps reduce incoming damage for cruisers, which is a really good perk, especially for this ship, because it's very lightly armored. Moving to the inspirations that I have specifically for this build, we're using Francesco Membelli, which is also another Italian cruiser commander, which we may be featuring later in the series, which helps reduce our main battery reload for cruisers, and Ding Ru Chang helps overall with the main battery reload, really trying to get the reload down. As you are going to see, they're painfully slow. We have a cruiser main battery range increase in the first slot with Beyond Range. Our second inspiration we have is increasing the torpedo range by just a little bit. Our next perk that we have selected is Punch Through, which helps with the AP shell damage and increases our penetration. But the one thing that's unique to this cruiser commander is this skill, the subtle manipulations, which actually turn your AP shells more into like SAP rounds, where you get less overpins, resulting in changing the overall characteristics of those AP shells. But since we have SAP rounds, I decided to keep it the other way. So moving on to the last perk, we have Fixated, which helps with our grouping with our main batteries along with the dispersion, so overall accuracy. Last slot, our legendary perk is Refill Station, which is only a level 2 and does help reduce our main battery reload by 5%, which you'll need. The only mod slot that we have available is Aiming Systems Mod 1 or the other two, which is Secondary or Turret Traverse. I would pick Aiming Systems Mod 1. And one unique thing about this line, unlike any other line, is that you have the ability to equip SAP rounds, which is called semi-armor piercing rounds. You are able to use that in lieu of HE shells. However, if you pick that, you do lose out a little bit on your AP shell damage and your HE shell damage, as you can see right here, which is what I had to grind through when I first had this. So I'm going to be playing this almost as if it's my first time through, because when I first went through this line, SAP shells weren't an option, and they got reworked a couple months ago. So we're going to take a look at that for the first time. On to the survivability for the Giussano specifically. Its HP points is 24,000 with a 7% torpedo damage reduction, and it is extremely lightly armored. On to the artillery, which I will say is a bit of a weak point for this entire line. You are going to have painfully long reloads. And remember, we spec'd everything we could into the main battery reload with almost fully maxed out commanders, and we can still only get our main shells down to 14.3 seconds. So not very good. Our AP shell characteristics and our SAP shell damage is down below, as you can see, and they're very similar, with actually the SAPs being a little bit higher, but you get no fire chance other than your secondary armament, which I wouldn't count on because you have to be within 3.7 clicks. Moving on to the torpedoes, they are very long as far as their range, and because of the perk that we have, it goes from 8 kilometers up to 8.8 because we get a 10% boost. And your torpedo speed is only 51 knots. So they're mainly used for zoning torpedoes in an area. Your AA defense is subpar at best, with a max starting firing range at only 4 kilometers. And it's not very good as far as its DPM. So don't rely on your AA to save you. However, your maneuverability, it can help you in a fight against carriers. One of the biggest strengths of this entire line is you mainly have a high maximum speed, a really good turning circle radius, and very low rudder shift time. So in the early going, this will set you up for being able to be really agile in the upper tiers. The other main benefit that you get is that your concealment relatively is very low as a base perk, and you can spec into that to get it lower. And I've seen these things really drop spot, and as you get later down the line, not in this specific ship, but you also get a smoke generator, which helps conceal you even better. Onto the armor, it is very weak at this tier. As you can see, we only have a 13 millimeter bow, which really can't stop much of anything at this tier. Your other armor is a little better at bouncing things, but overall, if you can get HE spammed rather badly in this. You can't really go toe-to-toe with anything up close. Battleships, largely, though, will overpin you because you have such low armor rating, and the AP shells won't have enough time to arm, so it can be a little frustrating to go up against something like this, even if they're flat broadside. Even with the Citadel that is raised as high as it is, I've been overpinning ships, even with my own 152 shells. So it can be a little trolly when you're going up against one of these things. We are on the map Crash Zone with a mainly Tier 3 lobby with a couple of Tier 4 sprinkled in there. And I'm going to be zooming in on the mini-map, which is in the upper left-hand corner. And I want to show that the blue ring that I have that you see is my detection ring. So anything that gets within that, I will get spotted. However, because of my 8.8 kilometer concealment, you're going to notice that the reds that spawn directly opposite of me don't even go towards the cap. In fact, they actually start drifting. Those 3 ships that you see right there at the bottom that my icon keeps targeting and untargeting, they are moving towards Bravo, leaving this entire Charlie cap wide open. So here we pop back. I just wanted to kind of speed it up for the sake of, nothing was really happening other than just kind of showing the positioning of everybody and what they were doing. Here I shoot just because I want to see what these guys are going to do. They're so distracted by the middle that even the battleship that's in the back, the Wyoming, and again, this is lower tiers, I understand that, but I'm out here at the flank and no one's going to take a shot at me. Even though I'm spotted, even though I'm lit up like a Christmas tree, and I'm taking these shots for a couple of reasons because they're not focusing me, and until they start, I might as well keep shooting at what I can. However, that destroyer decided to push outside my range. These shells are rather floaty for long distances, and they're really slow. They're painfully slow. The problem is that they're not heavy-hitting shells, which is frustrating. And that's why a lot of people struggle with this line, and I understand it. I get it, because when you're wanting to chime in with your guns, most everything can out-DPM you at this tier, and even all through the tiers as you're going up the line. Your reload for your main battery guns are just really, really slow. And even other cruisers that have the exact same shells as you do as far as caliber-wise, their DPM is almost half of yours. It's ridiculous. The Königsberg comes to mind, the German Tier 4, compared to the Tier 4 Montecuccoli, which we will feature next. The reload disparity between those two is just absolutely ridiculous. However, now that we have SAP shells, it's a little different, because SAP shells have a very unique characteristic to them. They're called semi-armor piercing rounds, and the reason why they're called that is because they have kind of the penetrating ability of an armor piercing shell. However, they boast never being able to overpin, meaning that they deal all of their damage as soon as they hit the target. As you can see right there, we get nothing but pins. In fact, I've never seen any overpins with SAP shells. And I'm sure most of you are thinking, well, what's the downside here? Unfortunately, they can shatter. And if they hit an armor threshold that is just a little too great, they'll deal no damage. They won't even pen. They'll just shatter right on the surface. The penetration angles are very good. They're some of the best, if not the best in the game, meaning that ships have to almost be completely nose in, depending on the size of your shells, in order to bounce SAP shells. You can do penetration damage on targets even when they are steeply angled, which is a huge bonus. The one downside, though, is that the SAP shells can saturate a target's air, like whatever it is, whatever surface that they're shooting at. They can deal saturation damage rather quickly, meaning all of your follow-up shots will deal significantly less damage than the initial ones that you shoot. And you'll see that as you kind of go down the line. Here we're going to speed it up because, again, not a whole lot is happening other than a carrier is pestering us, and we're going to dodge. We're not going to be able to take out a lot of his planes, but we can dodge his incoming torpedo drops because that's one of the benefits of this line of ships. They're hard to spot. When you do spot them, they can turn rather quickly, even if you don't spec into rudder shifting. As you can see, and now that the carrier's spotted, we're going to go back to regular speed. And we're just going to kind of show what these SAP shells can do to carriers and what AP shells can do. As you can see right there, we got nothing but shatters. Even though it's a lightly armored target, even at range, the penetration can drop off, meaning that it doesn't have the velocity or the speed to be able to penetrate the initial thickness of armor, and it just shatters. You got to get a little bit closer. Although SAP shells against really, really lightly armored targets like destroyers can still deal that damage and deal it rather effectively, as you kind of saw in that little mini clip at the very beginning of the video. There we get 4 bounces. He is angled, so we're going to switch back to SAP. We get our torpedoes off, and although they're very slow, they do have a long range. So eventually they're going to catch up to this Rhine and hit them and take them out. But the one benefit also to these torpedoes is that they have a really fast reload. So don't be afraid to shoot these whenever you have the opportunity. Even if you don't think something's there, it's still not a bad idea to throw them. See how steeply angled that target is, and we were still able to get many penetrations against him with the SAP shells. So that's how effective these are. And these torpedoes, when they hit, and you'll feel it. It's actually quite embarrassing whenever you can get these hits against targets with with your torpedoes, because you kind of don't see them coming, and you tend to forget about them. So after that, there really wasn't much else to showcase. The team was pretty much all wiped out, and we were able to win the match after we took out that carrier. So that's going to take a look at the Giussano for you at the Tier 3. Not the greatest ship. It's going to be quick to grind through that. Top of the leaderboard, nothing really snazzy to talk about. It's a Tier 3 ship. So grind it out, get through it. It's going to give you a basic introductory course to how the Italian cruisers are going to play. Just get used to the fact that you have long reloading main shells. But that's going to take a look at that. We're going to take a look at the Montecuccoli next. So thank you, captains, for tuning in to the new series. I'm really excited for it. This is the USS Endeavor, signing off.